Travis, thank you for joining us again here on the LitBlock. You're one
Yeah.
of our favorites, if you can't tell.
Yep.
We're always looking for opportunities to connect with you and hear your insights, and it's always something special. And just in case others have not seen or heard your other webinars or times on LitBlock, just by quick introduction, you're a middle school teacher in North Carolina, and you
Yeah.
have two books out, and the most
Mhm.
recent is the one with Benchmark
Yep.
on reflective readers, which is
Yeah.
just a beauty of a book. So, and you're just a luminary in humanity and in education. So
Yeah.
it's just a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you.
And the focus of this month, as you know, has been to talk to different educators that hold different roles and
Mhm.
hear about their reflections from the past year.
Mhm.
So we all know that, um, last year was just like something we've never experienced before. And this entire year has been full of tragedy and horrible things. And at the same time, we also know that through this experience, we've learned things. And
Mhm.
some of those things we want to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so while acknowledging just how unbelievable the past year has been, to
Mhm.
look at the silver linings that have come from that, and to take it from a middle school teacher's and author's perspective. So
Yeah.
I have a few questions to ask you. The first one begins with, what have you learned about students this year?
Well, I've learned, in short, I've learned that kids, as always, have craved authenticity across their time in school, and they are still, even in this moment, last year being as crazy as it was, and this year having, a lot of stress associated with it, even more so craving authenticity. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're looking for teachers to cut assignments in half or to limit what they actually teach. It's more of, I want to know why this is important. And I think that's a powerful question. I think that's a necessary question for students to ask, but it's a necessary question for teachers to ask. Last time, one of the conversations that you and I had this, and what that conversation that you and I had, but more or less what I'm taking away from it now is that things don't have to be outrageous and these very assignments that tilt toward entertainment or something that is loud and has all the bells and whistles. I think one of the things that we've been talking about lately, students, we were finishing up a Holocaust unit, and one of the things I talked with students today as they were filling out their book profile form, I told them, you spent several weeks of your life reading this one book. And whenever we spend a lot of time doing something, a good question is to think, why did this matter? What am I carrying away from it? And I just want to share this very briefly, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Um, but this is a Padlet that I created, and I had students' permission. But what I wanted them to do was to do a search for. Let me get rid of this. Do a search for an image of the book, and then give the book a rating, and explain why they gave it that rating. So it was, out of four, one, two, three, or four.
Mhm.
And then, of course, they connected it. Well, I take that back. You don't know that. But we connected it to one of the big questions we'd been talking about. So, one of our big questions was, do words have power? Another one
Mhm.
was, do all people have access to liberty and justice? Another one was, let me see, do I have a responsibility to make the world a better place? And to me, this is a very ordinary thing that has such power, because what students can then do is, we're going to go into this and comment. And, I'm not here to share strategy necessarily, but I did want to say that I've learned that students, like I said, they want something that is real, because things that are real have depth.
Yeah.
and they have power. And simplicity is key.
Mhm.
And that is something I've learned about them. I could also say I've learned that about teaching in the past several years.
Ah, well, that moves me on to a second question. Actually, let's table that question
Right.
because I'm curious what you've learned about educators before we get to teaching. So that's what you learned about students,
Mhm.
really that authenticity, they crave it and keeping it simple
Mhm.
really makes a direct line to
Yeah.
authenticity. What have you learned about educators during this time?
Um, I've learned that educators are are getting very brave. And I believe that educators are reclaiming agency that they thought they had lost. Um, there's a lot of professional literature out there that reminds us that we have power, that we have agency. And this situations, while we are tired, I'll admit I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
There are things that have happened that I have become very frustrated with, both locally, statewide, nationally. Um, I'm not happy with the move to continue with standardized testing this year. I'm not happy to, with that. But I will say that I have been reminded, and other educators around me as we've talked, we've been reminded that we do have agency, that we are ready to speak out, and that those of us who have been speaking out are continuing to do so. But I've seen others step up and say, enough is enough, and I'm willing now to speak out against this.
Wow, that's really important, and that agency, that collective agency,
Yeah.
is powerful.
Yeah.
So,
Especially as we move into, with so many conversations that are going on in education right now, conversations about equity, conversations
mhm,
about authenticity, conversations about what it means to be a learner. And even with the science of reading conversation that's been going on, these are things that we have to lean into, and we have to be willing to lean into. And I've seen teachers, a willingness to do that. So, I salute our profession. There are a lot of deep thinkers and hard workers out there, and we owe them a lot.
yeah, agreed, agreed. So, the last question for our time together is, what have you learned about teaching?
Oh gosh, I've learned a whole lot about teaching.
Mm.
Summing that up, I've learned I've learned that I need to start more with kids. Whenever you go through, um, well, for me, I'll speak for me. When I went through university, my university experience at lesson planning and writing things, so often there's this focus to start with the standards, to start with the stuff that the things that you're supposed to be teaching, the content, skills,
Right,
whatever.
right.
And as I continue to move into throughout in my career, and I've been in teaching for 14 years. So in that 14-year time frame, I've seen this consistent, we go to the skills, to the content, to whatever.
Mhm,
But I've learned, and I knew this before, but this year it has cemented.
mhm.
If I'm starting with content or skills, I'm not starting with students, and I'm leaving them out completely. And I have turned this year a lot of stuff over to them and saying, all right, like those big questions that I shared with you, students helped me come up with those.
Mm,
I worked with them to create those. I didn't just write them and let them go. That was based on conversations that we had had. So they were the ones who helped generate those questions. Whenever I started or wanted to say, I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What is your opinion? What do you think? Is this something that's worthwhile? I had a young man this year who, he and I get along, but sometimes he can be rather recalcitrant. and he pushed back against something that we were doing. And so I approached him and I said, would you like to do something on your own? And he said, as a matter of fact, I would. And so I worked with him to create something that would work just for him. And he did everything that we did in class. He filled out the Padlet that I just shared. And in his book, he talked about the power of immersion in the story that he was reading. And he said, this book, he gave it the highest rating he could. And he said, I give this because there are so many points in this story that immerse you in it. And he began to give examples. He read Liddy by Catherine Patterson. And I don't, I, I don't take, I've learned this year that when students push back against things that we're doing, like an assignment or something, it's not necessarily that they're pushing back against me. You know, it's not a personal attack. It is them saying, I want to learn. Can you offer something else, or can you work with me to do something else? And at first, my first tendency was to say, we worked hard, we created this together. I thought, but then he had something else in mind, and I had to learn to be okay with that. So teaching has less to do with the stuff, and it has everything to do with meeting the needs of the people in our room. And when we do that, I'm getting a little emotional now, but when we do that, we're meeting them there. We're meeting them where they are. And I've talked with you, I've talked with Laura Robb a lot about this whole idea of the heart and the mind. I like to put the two of those together, thinking of the heart of the mind. And that's where we have to meet them. And that's where this year I've been willing to, consistently meeting them there.
Yeah.
And it's made all the difference.
Wow. That's so big. Once again, talking with you, I get the chills, and I am ever more grounded in my commitment to our profession, and once again inspired by your words and all you bring.
Thank you so much, Patty. I enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.